Hello, my name is Taisha Woodcock with ITEC 7500. This is Artifact 8, Criterion 12, Criterion 14, Criterion 15, and Criterion 17. Criterion 12, collaborate with another educator. Standard 4.1/4A, collaborate with colleagues. Candidates dedicate planning time to collaborate with colleagues to create authentic learning experiences that leverage technology. I was working with another educator to create a project and the requirements and rubric for the project. Um, since we were both ELA teachers, different grades, but we wanted students to reflect on what their favorite book is. In my county right now, they are working on an initiative to increase reading, and they are having, I guess, a competition per se about using the minutes that they've read, whether it's a book, a magazine, anything that they've read. So we created an assignment that uses Flip, or formerly known as Flipgrid, for students to create a video to share with others about what their favorite book is and why they would recommend it and who the book would be great for. We worked on the requirements and the type of rubric that we would prefer using. As you can see, we worked together. There was also a third collaborator who was texting her input. I then created my own example to share with students. I followed the rubric and the provided script so that they could be able to see what an example looked like. Criterion 14, facilitate virtual learning activity featuring expert guests to advance learning objectives. Standard 4.3/4C, local and global collaboration. Candidates use collaborative tools to expand students' authentic real-world learning experiences by engaging virtually with experts, teams, and students locally and globally. One of our 8th grade standards is to write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, relevant descriptive details, and well-structured event sequences. We also have, when it's broken down, into I can statements, is I can write a narrative paper, develop a narrator into characters, and so on. I invited a published author to speak to my students virtually. Colton Prism has published 2 books and is working on his 3rd. His characters are not the normal neurotypical children that most books focus on. Here is Mr. Prism speaking with the class. They are engaged and in speaking with him, happy to see him and ask questions. Mr. Prism spoke to the students about his writing process, where he focuses on inclusivity so that kids who normally don't see themselves in stories are able to see themselves in the main characters. He finds inspiration by looking at what he does know. He uses his own experiences and then puts it into a fictional setting. These were the main points that he gave to students about the writing process, and hope that they were able to use the inspiration and tips that he gave in writing their own narratives. Criterion 15, demonstrate effective communication with all student supporters. Standard 4.4/4D, cultural competency. Candidates demonstrate cultural competency when communicating with students, parents, and colleagues and interact with them as co-collaborators in student learning. We use a learning management system that allows us to create posts to send out to student parents or guardians or the adults in the students' lives. I communicate with them through posting newsletters. I find those helpful and more eye-catching. I am not able to send them out weekly, but I do try to keep up with them and send them what's going on in the classroom and what uh, is going to happen in a week or so. I also try to provide a copy of the text from the newsletters so that the post is able to translate it into the receiver's preferred language. We have many families who English is not the first language. They may only speak Spanish or another language. I communicate with students on the class board that we have in our learning management system. I try to post the Google Slides that I use each day. I try to post them on the class board. This lets students who miss class know what we did that day, and also parents are able to view through their student's account what has been going on in class. I have a board in my classroom that I try to keep up with what's going on for the next 2 weeks, and I'll post that on the class board. I share this with parents in the posts that I send out, but I also put it on the class board so that if a parent does need to look into their student CTLS, they can, and also to help students keep track of what's going on in the classroom. I give links for students who've missed what we were watching or doing in the class. Criterion 17, aligned to content area standards. Standard 5.2/5B, authentic and create and active learning. Candidates design authentic learning activities that align with content area standards and use digital tools and resources to maximize active, deep learning. Here are the standards that I use when having students create a figurative language book. What we covered, or what the standards covered, is about like verbal irony. We also it also is looking at dramatic irony, but I also added about 10 other types of figurative language that I thought students needed to know and should know when it came to figurative language and reviewing or annotating, analyzing poems and short stories and different types of text. This is the figurative language directions and rubrics that I created for students. As you see, we have about 12 figurative language terms, and then I broke it down for students about what needed to be within the book. Students were needed to have the definitions for the figurative language, one example that they found on their own, and an example that we covered within class needed to be also in their book. This is an example of one of the students' books. They had a creative cover, personification, there's the definition. The example one is from The Lighthouse, which we read within class. And then example two they found on their own, the tree dances in the wind, and each time they had an example, they had to explain why this was personification or why this was alliteration and how the author was using it. Hi, this is Taisha Woodcock with Artifact 9, Criterion 16, 19, and 23. Criterion 16, Accommodate Learner Differences, Standard 5.1/5A. I was able to provide evidence of my intentional design of learning activities to provide content to my learners in various ways to enhance the learning experience. I did this through previewing the vocabulary for a short story called The Landlady. We used Quizlet.com, let the students go through on their own. We did it as a class on our main board. It also says the word so students can hear how it is pronounced. I gave students a turn to come up and flip the cards. So they always enjoy coming up and messing with the board. I gave each student a copy of the short story so that they are able to write on it and mark it as they need to. At the same time that they have the copy to read, I also play the audio from YouTube to be able to help those who are more auditory listeners so that they have it, are able to receive the information in two different ways. Once we read and discussed the short story, I gave the students the opportunity to watch a performance or interpretation of The Landlady, so that they were able to visually see the story played out. We would also take the opportunity to discuss the similarities and differences between the written/audio version of the short story and the interpretation of the performance visually. Criterion 19, Facilitate and Guide Learning as Students Take Ownership of Their Learning Goals, Standard 6.1/6A. Ownership of learning candidates foster culture where students take ownership of their learning goals and outcomes in both independent and group settings. At the beginning of the quarter, in my class, I had students fill out a SMART goals worksheet so that they can identify what they wanted out of the class and maybe some of their bigger goals, such as getting on the AB honor roll for that quarter. The SMART goal worksheet breaks it down to specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely, and then what steps would the students need to take to achieve those goals. Our school does provide a weekly wrap-up sheet for students to fill out to cover all their classes. So students would use these sheets to monitor their progress. During homeroom, students logged in online to check their grades and see if there were any missing assignments. Students were able to go to the teachers that they needed to work on, plan to raise their grades. And the students were able to reflect on their overall grades and then determine also kind of what they needed to do. One student, as you see, wrote they have 2 missing assignments, so they knew that they needed to go back for reading or ELA to complete those assignments. Maybe with the math, on this one student, they would need to maybe go to tutoring to help raise that grade. Criterion 23, provide alternative ways for students to show competency. Standard 7.1/7A, alternative assessment. Candidates provide alternative ways for students to demonstrate competency and reflect on their learning using technology. So after reading The Landlady, students were given a choice board to select one short response to write and one creative activity to show their understanding of dramatic irony and the story that we read. The constructed response options allowed students to choose what topic they wanted to focus on, whether it's comparing and contrasting the text and live production or focusing on how foreshadowing and suspense were being used within the story. Students were able to type the response in Word and submit that by sending me a link usually. Then the students had a creative choice board with about 6 different options, such as creating a movie poster or book cover, changing the ending, making a comic strip to illustrate the story, and body biographies. Here, a student created a comic strip using storyboard that instead of drawing it with their hands, so that they could be more detailed and realistic looking. Here are 2 examples of movie posters that students created. One, the student drew it by hand and of course picked who they would like for their actors or actresses and put in some important elements from the short story. Another student used Canva to create her movie poster. Here, a student created an Instagram post by drawing it, as in doing it from Billy Weaver's point of view as he's traveling. And here's are examples of students who did a body biography. One was using The Landlady, and another student drew a comic strip. Even though they're stick figures, it was pretty detailed about what was happening within the story. This is Taisha Woodcock with Artifact 10, Criterion 18. Criterion 18, Design Digital Learning Environment, Standard 5.3/5C, Instructional Design. Candidates explore and apply instructional design. My county uses a learning management system called CTLS. I'm able to create digital classrooms for each class period and for each quarter if I choose to. Generally, I have a roster right here, but I took it off for privacy reasons. This is the homepage. This is what I see as I'm working on the classroom. I post a lot of things on the class board, such as links, pictures of our calendar within the classroom, so that if students are out or a parent has needs to know or has a question about it, they can log into their side of CTLS and see the class board. I'm able to post assignments and links to the assignments. If you notice, some of these there are multiple assignments on one day, but it's because I'm able to differentiate my assignments and assign them to specific students. So I do have several Spanish speaking students, and I'll post an assignment in Spanish as well as provide them with the English version as well, so that they are able to look at both of them. Then I'm able to differentiate and assign to specific students specific articles based on their lexile levels or their needs. I am able to leave a voice recording to help students, give directions to students, give information, post our slides for that day. Also able to post our resources for students. Um, Maybe they lost their packet or were absent or are going to be absent for several days. They are able to go to a resource center to see and download and print out the work that they needed. Student view. And so this is what it kind of looks like on the student side.